Cheers and welcome to Drink at Your Desk Friday. It's Friday afternoon. Grab yourself a beer if you're contractually allowed to do so or your boss can't see you. And we're going to head over to our studio for our chat with James May. James May off of the telly.
Him off Top Gear?
Yeah, him off of the Grand Tour.
Oh, wow.
Loves his bikes, got loads of bikes. We had a great chat, over an hour. So settle in for a long one.
Get a couple of beers.
Might need 2 beers. Yeah. This video is sponsored by Siddy, and you can be in a draw to win a pair of Siddy Shot 2 road shoes. All you have to do is comment below and tell us where Siddy shoes are from.
Just as a clue, the Giro d'Italia is currently going on.
Thank you, Liam.
No problem.
Very helpful. Now, without further ado, let's crack on over to our studio and watch us chat with James. Thanks for joining us on Drink at Your Desk. So we're on a cider and a bit of Moretti, and you've got a lovely cup of tea. I can see that.
Yes, I would normally have. I mean, technically, it's a bit early for me. Come on, it's 4 p.m. But I would have a glass of white or something. But I'm slightly fragile from an evening with Richard Hammond, which sounds like something nice you'd go to in a West End theatre, but it isn't. It's a rather messy affair at his house, which ended with us trying to. I don't know why we were doing this, and I'm not sure I should even tell you, but we were trying to start a 1930s motorcycle he owns, whilst we could barely stand up. And weirdly enough, we failed.
That sounds like so many of our plans, actually, to be fair.
I've never done that. I used to work with a guy who used to drive in the 1950s, used to drive his motorbike down the hairpins to the pub in Southstoke, and he knew he was too drunk to drive home when he couldn't get around the hairpin on the way back up.
Yes.
Just to leave it on the corner, walk home from there.
Well, walk home from the hairpin.
Yeah, just like wander home.
That's very specific.
Yeah, go and get it in the morning. Obviously you're well known as a motoring journalist, but also a great love of bicycles throughout your whole life.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about this the other day. I haven't been without at least one bicycle since I was 3, since I had my Rally Mayflower for my birthday. And I've always had at least one bike since then. And I do like bikes, and I still maintain, I've written this many times in the past, but I think it is humankind's greatest invention because it seems to beat the system. You do get something for nothing with a bicycle, which isn't supposed to be possible in physics being rather bloody minded. But bicycles, you use the same energy that you use as a human being walking or running, which is very ugly motion, and it turns everything into smooth circles. And somebody worked out once that for the same energy expended, you can go between 5 and 12 times as far on a bicycle, which is remarkable, and it's free.
And all on a bowl of porridge, in my case.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to eat your bowl of porridge or your bunch of bananas. And you might have to stop and have a Mars bar or something on the way around. But it's very efficient, cycling. I can't think of anything that's sort of more efficient.
And you cycle all the time. You're currently living in London, is that right?
Yeah, I try and ride my bike every day. I mean, occasionally I do fail, but I'd say 6 days out of 7 in a week I ride my bike at the very least a few miles. And I usually try and do about 10 at a reasonably vigorous but not unseemly pace, so that I don't just become a tub of lard. I'm at that age where that can happen very easily.
Was that as a direct result of, I know when we went into lockdown, you talked a lot about going out and running every day as part of health. And in fact, you said you became well buff as a result, as I recall.
I did say that.
Did it start then, or was it something that you were already doing at that point?
No, well, I think I got into the habit of riding my bike, very counterproductive, but to the pub and that sort of thing. And I realised that was rather feeble, and I ought to start riding further. And of course, in lockdown, you were only supposed to go out of your house to do exercise, and I wanted to go out. So I thought, I can't do the things I normally would do for fun, like riding motorcycles and driving and so on. So I'll just ride my bike around, and I developed a series of round robin routes. And then I bought a new bike, and I bought a few other new bikes, and then I bought a Garmin, and I, did all that sort of nerdy, roady stuff. And I did find that actually I was becoming a much healthier person, probably the leanest and most upright I've been for 2 decades. I don't know. It's just riding a bike. It's not even, it's not an exercise regime. It's just get on your bike and ride it every day at a reasonably vigorous pace. But you don't have to, dress up particularly. You don't have to go mad. You don't have to have PBs, and you don't have to drink those funny juices, or you can if you want to. But even, if you just ride your bike, if you just incorporate riding your bike into your everyday life, like you cycle 3 or 4 miles to work every day, after 2 weeks, you will notice that you feel better. I sound like one of those health and fitness evangelists. I'm really not, but I was just staggered at, regular bike riding rather than occasional bike riding. I was amazed at how good it was for me.
It is that daily occurrence of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be especially fast or anything. It's just daily. It's great as well.
Yeah, I think that's where little and often is. And you can build that. I mean, I noticed, I'm going to sound boring again now, but I noticed after a month or so of riding my bike around because it got me out of the house, I suddenly noticed that I was stronger and that I was gradually going faster and faster on my bike, and I could decide to go to the other side of London, and where originally I'd have thought that was an expedition, it's now something I would do to go and get an interesting looking kebab. And
how far down that rabbit hole have you got? I mean, you've talked about getting I know you've got a number of new bikes. You've got a Garmin. Have you entered into the middle-aged man in Lycra territory? Are you kind of recording all your rides on Strava? Have you gone that far?
I haven't got Strava because I feel I might embarrass myself with that sort of thing. It's a bit too public. And I haven't really gone Lycra, but I do now have a proper cycling jacket, and I do have some quite unseemly tight-fitting leggings. They're not true cycling trousers, but they're the ones I wear on my bike. And I've gone clipless, which I've never done before. I'd always had toe straps, but I've now all the road bikes have got clipless on. I tend to keep flat pedals on my specials that I've built and the hybrids, because they're a bit sort of jump on, jump off.
Yeah. And did you do the comedy fall over at the lights on the first time?
Weirdly, I haven't yet.
Okay.
I did when I first put them on, because everybody says, you've got to practice and you've got to. I watched a couple of videos and I thought, right, I'll do this, lean against a wall and practice taking my feet out in an emergency. And I set them very loose to start with. I really unwound the little Allen screw. But I found it made perfect sense very quickly. And I'm going to say not yet, because of course eventually I will, but I haven't done the having to stop suddenly at a junction and forgetting that my feet are stuck to the pedals. I had one quite bad crash on my bike when I was about 16, 17 years old, which was, and there's another classic one, the shoelace from my trainer wrapped up around the left crank as I arrived at a junction. And it's only once you've stopped and you've started leaning that way, you realise you've got no foot. And it's a very long way from the ground when that happens. And I fell over right in front of a car, which fortunately stopped before it ran over my head. But ever since then, I've always either worn proper bike shoes or tucked my laces into my trainers.
Excellent. Right. Well, let's have a look at some of the bikes that you've sent us from your stable. Now, one thing I was going to ask is, obviously you've got a lot of bikes and you've got a lot of cars. Have you got more bikes than cars, or more cars than bikes? Oh, no,
I've got more bicycles than cars or motorcycles. I've actually cut back a bit on motorcycles because they're sort of nice things to fiddle with, but they're too high maintenance and they take up too much space. A single garage can hold a collection of, if you organise them carefully, sort of, between 10 and 15 bicycles.
How many do you have at the moment?
Very good. I haven't. 21.
Can't beat me.
That's quite a few. Well, we've got 7 that you've sent us pictures of. Thanks for doing that. This one was a lockdown project. Am I right?
Yeah, I've always wanted to. I've built a lot of bikes, and I still do occasionally knock up a special just for fun. But I wanted to build a proper sort of weight weenies bike, and it was in lockdown. I didn't have a great deal else to do. I sort of became a bit obsessive about it. I found the Orbea frames online, and it's not quite made to measure, but it's sort of halfway there. and it was very light, and it was one of the lightest I could find. And then I sort of got obsessed with, buying light wheels, and then I went for rim brakes, because although everybody was saying, well, you should get the disc frame, but the rim brakes are a bit lighter. And the SRAM group set was the lightest one available at the time. I think it might still be, actually. And so it went on, and it ended up costing a stupid amount of money, which is I'm not going to admit to, but it does feel fantastic. I've never had a really light bike before, but I've never had a carbon one, and it's sort of difficult to explain to people that it's not. I mean, obviously, if you're a racer, it will go faster, and the lightweight, it's less to accelerate and it's less to eat around the corner and all that physics stuff. But just the sort of sensation of immediacy and crispness that comes from a really light, really stiff bike. I'm going to say immediacy and stiffness again, as if I haven't just drunk 5 pints.
It's a very good phrase.
But you know what I mean? When you get to a hill, even a slight hill, any excess weight in the bike suddenly becomes luggage. It's like having a backpack on. So, with a light bike, you suddenly think, I go up there a bit more easily than you do.
Yeah, and according to the drive video, costs about as much as a Dacia Sandero.
Well, weirdly, it did. Yes, basic Sandero was about the same price. Yeah. I mean, that is an expensive way to make a bike. If you take a bike that's about £4,000, so say a Bianchi Ari would be about £4,000, wouldn't it? If you built that up out of the bit, bought the frame and bought exactly the same components, the LT group set and so on, it would probably be getting on for 50% more expensive, bought as bits. But it means you can choose exactly what you want, and you can have a real nerd out on it.
And you can spend a very good Saturday building it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Just the best.
I sort of didn't want it to end. As I got near, I thought, I'm running out of new bits to put on this bike, because everything, you open a little box, and there's this beautiful new front derailleur, and you can have a little wobble for a moment while you study it.
Did you get the SRAM? Oh no, sorry. If it's ETAP, you can get the SRAM shifters and the mechs, and you can just put them on the table, and you can walk them around the table.
I've seen that done at my local bike shop. That's SRAM, not ETAP. I've got I upgraded my Giant. I didn't send you a picture of the Giant, but I upgraded that to Shimano Di2 Ultegra, which of course isn't wireless. But you could still plug all the wires together, when I first got it, and then fiddle with the levers and watch everything. Deeply satisfying.
And obviously, you're well known for having an appreciation of all things mechanical. So, what about a bicycle is what's your favourite part of a bike, like from a mechanical perspective?
Ooh, that's a good. In many ways, I think the chain is one of the most fascinating. And I had to explain this to people in the past, that the thing that allowed the bicycle to forward to go from the sort of Victorian penny farthing type bike to the so-called safety bicycle was the developments in chain technology that allowed them to make a chain small enough and reliable enough. But when you take a chain apart, you get your little rivet popper on it. It's remarkable how it's made, because they're not actually that expensive chains, and millions and millions and millions of them are made, but the tolerances are such that little pin grips in one set of plates, but just passes through the others and the rollers. And it's right every single time on that chain and on every other chain. I've never had a chain, you get a tight spot occasionally because you get some gunk in it, but I've never had a chain sort of fail in any significant way. And that's incredible, really. It is an incredible piece of technology. But I suppose my favourite bit though is I've got a bit of a soft spot for rear derailleurs, because they just look nice. If you look at the Shimano rear derailleur on my Rally Record Ace, I think I sent you a picture of that.
Let's grab that one. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, if you have a bit of a zoom onto the rear derailleur.
I wish I could zoom in a little bit further, but I don't think I can. But it's a beautiful looking bike.
It's a thin OBD, that one, yes. That's
a mid-80s bike, that, or a bit older?
No, it's older. I think it's actually late 60s.
Oh, is it? Oh, right, okay.
But, the frame is, some of the componentry is a bit newer, because that's Shimano 600 series, which I don't think existed then. So, I really need to look up the serial number on that bike. There's a very, very nerdy website where you can work out the age of Rally and Doors frames from the serial numbers, but I haven't done it yet. nicer.
You're still a regular ride for you, that one?
It's slightly more ornamental, to be honest. I'm so out of the habit of reaching down for the shifters. I know I don't. This never used to worry me when I was younger. When I had bikes, well, a lot of the bikes I had as a kid were just 5 speeds. They only had a rear clanger, nothing at the front, and they were friction lock. There was no indexing. It never used to worry me that I might put my fingers into the wheel, and I don't think I ever did. But now I've thought about it a bit too hard. I ride along that bike, and I sort of go to change gear like that, thinking I mustn't put my fingers in the wheel. Does anybody ever put their fingers in the wheel?
I'm not sure that they ever do, but I know what you mean. It's after you've been to the combined shifter, it's really difficult to go back, isn't it? It's
very, and it feels
kind of like,
I always think I've got to put my hand down there. I'm going to fall off if I do that. It's so disabling. But
yeah, I'm as used to it with that second thought.
So these down tube shifters, when I was buying when my dad was buying me my first proper road bike, there was one in the shop with the shifters on the bar ends.
Oh yeah,
Pointing
bar
backwards.
Yeah.
And my dad was going, "Oh yeah, these brilliant," because back in the day, if you were going to attack, you had to reach down, and that would signal you were going to attack. And now you could just do that. It's brilliant. And I was going, "Oh no, Dad, I want the flappy paddle ones." I've aged myself there.
You're a bit younger than us,
yeah. To about 2005 ish.
I remember seeing those. So they go in they're effectively made out of a handlebar plug, aren't they? But with a lever incorporated, very subtle. Is that the ones you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we used to sort of drool over those in a bike shop when we were kids, and eventually my mate Cookie he saved up and bought a Dawes Super Galaxy, which was the most exotic bike in the world in about 1928. And he also then converted it to those bar end shifters. And we stood around as a crowd of young men looking at them and just being, amazed, utterly amazed. It was more amazing than seeing your first internet-enabled smartphone, in the ends of the handlebars. Where's the cable? It was magical stuff.
Mm.
And now we can do it wirelessly by the click of a button.
And times have changed.
I know.
Yeah.
I've
got one last road bike that you've sent me here, which I'm going to grab up as well. This is a thing of beauty.
Yes, I bought that about a month ago.
Okay.
Because, and this is something I have to be slightly careful of. Some people get this with things like houses and old cars, which is much more dangerous. But I get a slight rescue the bicycle thing. And this bike didn't really need rescuing. It was in a very reputable bike shop in Glasgow. And I've looked at their website before, but when I saw this one, I just thought that colour scheme was so bang on 90s. Right, even the bar tape is 90s, isn't it? Mm. And it was the original. And I bought it sight unseen, and they posted it to me in a big bike box. And I was slightly nervous because I bought one or two things in the past, and when they've turned up, they've been a bit sort of meh. But I got that one out of the box, and I thought, oh no, I've scored here. This is fantastic, and it's virtually perfect. It's got a couple of tiny stone chips on, but the mechs and everything are good. The wheels are fabulous, and it's got Campag Record kit on it, and it's a pretty nice ride for a bike that's 25 years out of date. It's got a nice clang as the rear shifter moves, and it's sort of got a bit of flex in it, but not too much, and it's just a really nice. It's a nice thing.
Yeah,
there's something very right about a very straight top tube and a quill stem that's also perpendicular to the top tube.
Yeah,
very nice.
Yeah, there is. There's another bike I've got that I haven't sent you. Is I've got a Genesis Equilibrium, which is a sort of modern but classic bike, and that's got a horizontal. As I'd still call it, and there is. Since the Mike Burrows era, when the top tube slopes, which is all looks very dynamic and thrusting, but there is something, you're right, there's something very proper about that tube being parallel to the ground. It just makes it look very nice.
Yeah, I've got a bit of a soft spot for Moses. I'm going to show you this, which is my one that I used to have.
Oh, yes.
Very similar, a bit newer, probably about 2001, I think, that one. But yeah.
Yeah, that's
had to go up Mont Ventoux on that on its triple chain set. So
what's the block on the back there? Sorry,
it's not. It wasn't very much, but it did at least have a triple. So I was all right.
And you got up.
I got up. Okay.
That is a very close block because they're like half a tooth difference between each one.
Yeah, absolutely. They're crazy. Talking of Ventoux, have you ever done any of the big, the famous climbs, the Tour de France climbs, or the?
No, I'm a bit of a wimp, really. When I was in my 20s, I did some, and early 30s actually, I did some quite big bike riding I did Landelin to John O'Groats, I did some trips across France, London to Paris a few times, that sort of thing. And I did do a couple of the hills outside Paris, but I've never done the famous Tour de France hills. I'll be really honest with you, I'm a bit of I actually enjoy cycling in London. And a lot of people think this is a bit odd, but I also lived part of the time in a little cottage out in the country in South Wiltshire, which is very hilly for one thing, and very pretty. It's an area of outstanding natural beauty. But I find cycling in the countryside a little bit disheartening because it just goes on and on and on, and it's all blend. Then you get a massive hill, and it goes on and on and on. I like riding around London because you can still get some good exercise in it. I like the sort of cut and thrust of it, and you have to be quite alert, and you have to be very careful. It is a little bit hazardous, but I enjoy that. And also, the scenery changes very quickly in a place like London or any big city. There's lots to look at and lots to look out for, and there's people and smells and noise. If you ride through the country, you can go for an hour and one sheep goes meh at you, and that's the only thing that happens.
So there's quite a few bikes you've sent me here that you probably use around London. This one especially, I would say.
Yes.
Is that one of your London bikes?
Sorry, I was having a bit of the restorative tea. Now, I've actually got two Bromptons, which is incredibly extravagant. That one I bought quite recently because I was doing a travel show about Italy for Amazon. That's a plug. And I didn't take a bike with me. And as soon as I got there, we were away for 3 months. I thought, I really wish I had my bike because every day I could just have a bit of a bike ride. So I bought a Brompton from a local Brompton dealer, which is that one, which is the orange 3-speeder. But I've also got a green T5 Brompton, which I bought in 1997 or 8, back in the day when Bromptons weren't trendy at all, and they were ridden by sort of physics lecturers and the odd watercolor artists, and people used to laugh at you for riding a Brompton and say, "Oh, look at your funny bike with its silly little wheels." And I say, "Yes, it folds up." And everybody just used to think it was highly comical. But now, of course, it's more Bromptons than any other bike that I can think of. And I ride around on my old grey one, sort of shouting at people, going, "I've had this since before they were trendy. I've had it since 1990.
But on the other hand, you still have a bike people can laugh at. So let's get that up.
Yes.
Your lovely Moulton.
Yes, that one I bought a couple of years ago. I'd never ridden a Moulton. And I've known various people who have raved about them, sort of car journalists and techie people. And then that one came up, and they are a bit expensive. And I thought, well, I got another bit of bike rescue thing because it was in perfect nick. I thought I'm going to have that. So I've got a Moulton in my little secret bike museum. And it's a 9-speed, and it's actually quite nice, but it's a bit on the heavy side. And I find the geometry of it a bit weird. I mean, the Brompton geometry is a little bit weird. It's that sort of very upright, small wheel, slightly short wheelbase thing. But maybe I'm just used to the Brompton because I've ridden it so much. The Moulton feels like, it does feel like you're making a bit of a point when you go out on it. You know what I mean? It's got some suspension at the front, and you sort of ride along in almost a sort of slightly vicarish attitude, going, "Look at my rather interesting bicycle."
It's never quite made it into the mainstream, the Moulton.
Is that a 5 triangle design? I was trying to count them up, but then it's got a split top tube as well.
It's what they call the separable bicycle. They can't call it folding because it doesn't fold. You can simply effectively snap it in half. But I've never actually done it because I know it's one of those things you'll end up with 2 halves of bike, and then what? It's not really convenient having 2 halves of bike. It doesn't make it any smaller, really. It just makes it broken. And I also have terrible memories. I had a bike when I was about 14 years old that I always used to make bikes out of bits in those days. That's my "we were poor but we were happy" line. And this one was an old, I think it was a BSA frame, and I'd scrounged some secondhand wheels. And I put this thing together and I painted it myself, obviously, and put some decals on from Airfix or something like that. And I rode it around for a few years. By the age of about 14, when I maybe had it for 2 or 3 years, I was going up a hill near our house, and it had a band-on shifter. It was only 5-speed, obviously. And the band had obviously formed a stress razor in the steel frame. And I was riding along, and I suddenly thought, this bike has gone all springy, and it's because the down tube had snapped. And I went maybe another 3 or 4 strokes of the pedals before the top tube then also collapsed like a piece of liquid. So I had these 2 bits of bike, but they were still joined together by cables, obviously. And there was nothing I could do. I had to go to the bus stop and get the bus back to my house, which was about sort of 3 or 4 miles away. I had to get on the bus with this two bits of very obviously snapped bicycle. And I was sort of embarrassed and ashamed of it, because people were looking at me thinking, his bike snaps in half, which is quite funny on reflection. But ever since then,
at least it was obvious.
Yeah, but I've had a slight aversion to the idea of a bike that's designed to snap in half. Why the hell do that? So I leave it assembled.
Fair enough.
I've once had to get the bus home when my rear hub just decided not to, like, the drive ring broke, and then. But to everyone else, it looks like you've got a normal bike. So you're fully in Lycra, obviously. And you're getting on the bus saying, "Oh, can I have a ticket for Wells, please?" And then you're having to go home with what to most people looks like a perfectly functioning bicycle. It's like, "Oh, you've gone too far from home, haven't you?" And it's just like, no, look.
They just think you're knackered, yeah. But you get those failures like, broken driving ring. There's just nothing you can do by the side of the road. Like that. So you have to either throw your bike in the canal or suffer the humility of getting on the bus with it.
Are you the kind of person that takes minimal tools, or do you have do you take everything you need?
No, I take the basic puncture kit, and I've got one of those little folding multi-tools which has the sort of 3, 4 and 5 Allen keys, a couple of Torx heads and a screwdriver. But I could mend a puncture on the go and tighten up a rattly bit, but I couldn't torque the head or anything like that.
What's the worst one that you've done?
The worst what?
Like mechanical. I've ripped a snapped internal cable before riding up Sacalobra.
I had to gaff tape my carbon frame back together.
That beats mine. That beats mine to get home very far.
I rode home very slowly.
Yeah, God, when carbon fails, it really goes.
Yeah, it does. Gaffer tape is remarkable stuff. I mean, it's one of the great substitutes for proper engineering. The Army and PB use it a huge amount to stick stuff together. I never heard of anybody actually relaying a carbon fiber frame with gaffer tape.
Well, it was very much a get you home solution at that point. Yeah, when I'd landed on my top tube and kind of cracked it.
It might be the material of the future.
It may be.
A gaffer tape frame in a mold. See how strong it comes out.
There's a video in there somewhere, isn't there?
Yeah, it would be sticky on the outside, wouldn't it? Which would be annoying.
Yeah, getting it out of the mold would be a bit of
a true.
bit of a job. We've got a couple of other urban bikes here. Where's that lovely doors? Can we have a look at that? This is a beautiful thing.
Now that's one of my specials. I've built 4 or 5 specials. I didn't send you any of the others because I'd already covered them quite comprehensively in an article I wrote for the Sunday Times. But that's my original special, which I've had for yonks. And it is a Dawes frame. I think it's a continental version of the Galaxy, because it's got, if you look very carefully, you can see it's got the flip through lock at the back, like they always have in Holland.
Okay, yeah.
And the front light bracket is on the incorrect side for us. So it's a foreign frame. And I bought it from a bloke who'd half done it up. He put those wheels on and the 3-speed hub. And then I finished it off with mudguards, better brakes, better saddle and so on. And it's only a 3-speeder. That's why it's called the 3-speeder. I had a decal made up for it. But there's something about that bike, and I've never I've never quite been able to quantify it, but other people I know have ridden it and have, they begin by laughing at it and then they say, no, you're right. There is something magical about it. Something about the proportions and the geometry of that frame with those midwife handlebars, as I call them, is just, it's just a fantastic bike. I get on that. It's only 3-speed. It's a 3-speed Nexus hub. It's really quite straightforward. And I go off across town and I go absolutely flying past people who have spent £8,000 on bikes on that thing. Just brilliant. It fits me, and it's probably just pure coincidence because I just bought it off a bloke. It fits me perfectly, and I wouldn't part with that one for anything. You can offer me £500,000 for that bike, and you can't have it. I'll never be able to get it that right ever again.
Excellent. And what's your experience like of riding in London? I mean, over the years, you must have seen a lot of changes where you live. Now you're quite near to cycle superhighways. I know a lot of people, a lot of our readers have said they've seen you around. Simon, our community editor, met you down the pub. What's it like these days? How has it changed?
Well, I was sort of reserving judgment on it, but the cycle superhighway, I mean, I'm very close to the bit that goes through Chiswick and Hammersmith. My worry is that it's slightly overwrought, and I can see where the various councils have got themselves slightly tied in knots as they thought, right, we'll put the bike lane in, but because the bike lane's there, if a car's going to turn left at the traffic lights, you don't want that to conflict with the bike, so we better put separate lights for the bike. So we need another set of traffic lights, and that now means there's 3 cycles in every junction. And then they think, well, we're going to have to let people cross, but we'll have to put the zebra crossing, and they'll have to cross the bike lane, but we'll have to raise that to make it apparent. And then they decided to have the 2-way bike lane to one side of the road, which I think is genuinely a bit dodgy, because if, say, you're going westwards down Chiswick High Road or through Hammersmith, people in their cars going westward will turn right, but they never expect a bike to be coming over their shoulder, which they are now because it's a 2-way lane. And putting a 2-way road right next to another 2-way road, I think causes a lot of it. I've seen a couple of very close shaves. I've had a couple myself. And I just wonder if they've sort of got a little bit too obsessed with it, and in trying to make it work, it's turned into this incredible monster of civil engineering. Whereas I was always fairly happy just riding along the road, to be honest. I know not everybody is. But I'd be interested to know what the case was for putting both the 2-lane bike lane on one side rather than a single lane on either side. Do you know?
It easily works where there's not loads of side roads, but if you've got a side road, even with one side of a bike lane, it's a nightmare because you've just got so many stopping points. It sort of frustrates your progress. And I mean, there are a lot of people driving cars are a bit inattentive, but I also think that quite a lot of them just make that mistake because you don't expect a bike or anything, in fact, to be coming from that direction. And it's slightly putting people on the spot to expect them to suddenly appreciate and understand this new type of road layout that you don't really get anywhere else. There's nowhere else where you would turn right in your car but be crossing another 2 lanes of traffic.
Yeah, do you think that will bed in over time? I mean, obviously we've seen the changes to the highway code where now there's priority for people going straight on over people turning, just generally. Do you think those two things will kind of mesh together to make it a bit more acceptable for you?
Well, yes, I think so, and I hope so. I mean, I have noticed certainly over the last 10 years or so, attitudes to things like bikes have changed, have improved, in fact, massively, because there are quite a few more bikes now than there were 10 years ago, and there were more 10 years ago than there were 10 years or so before that. I remember being in London in the late 80s, and having a bicycle as my only means of transport. And actually bikes, it was one of those periods it was all the yuppie era, and nobody wanted to be seen on a bike, I don't think, and the bikes were pretty rare. And you took your life in your own hands if you went around London on a bike. But I think attitudes did improve, and I think, yes, people will sort of learn, they will sort of absorb this new way of using the road, which is nice because it's more inclusive. I do get into that argument with people about whose road is it, and I say, well, it's bollocks. They're shared spaces like parks. Everybody pays for them, in truth. Everybody can use them. even if people are just walking in them, they're entitled to. And you have to rely on the wit of humanity to make it work, rather than trying to turn it into some sort of proxy battle, which is just small-minded and feeble, I think. I can't stand that sort of thing. So yes, I hope to answer your question, I hope the sort of mentality of it will bed in. But also I think people have to be wary of over-designing these things and realizing that we can sort of, we can work it out. We're Homo sapien, we're wise beings.
And the other thing that's happened in London, especially over the last kind of 3 years, is the low traffic networks. Have you been affected by those? Do you have any opinions on them? I mean, you're probably quite close to one where you are, I would have thought. There
are a few near here. That where my house isn't one, but to be honest, this is a very small, inconvenient road, so it doesn't really have traffic on it apart from the people that live here anyway. I can sort of see the sense of them. I can also see why some people who live in them get annoyed with them. But it is undeniable, and I'm saying this as somebody who's made his living talking about cars on the telly and in print for the best part of 30 years. When there's a lockdown, when you're up in London and there's a security scare and they close the roads and all the rest of it and all the cars disappear, it's just nicer, I'm afraid. I know it's a bit idealistic as well, because we do need vans. We need vans more than ever because everybody orders everything from home. But cars are untidy. That's my biggest objection to them. If we could sort of make them disappear like those sponges that go very small once they've dried out. If you could do that with cars, they'd be great. But most of the time you're not in them, and then they just clutter. And if you get somewhere where there's just bikes riding around, during the lockdown, and I'm glad I saw this in a way, even though the circumstances were really unpleasant, but you were allowed to go out on your bike. You could do your daily exercise. And a few times I realized I need to go up to the West End of London. And this was, so what year were we in then? 2020, wasn't it, the lockdown? Spring had come and the weather was nice, and I'd go up to town on my bike. And we're never going to see this again, but the place was empty apart from a handful of taxis and emergency service vehicles, and then a load of people on bikes. And it was like some surreal video game where you were part of a sort of cycle gang that had taken over a deserted capital city. And it was just fabulous, having London to yourself to ride around on your bike. As I said, we'll never see it again.
I wonder whether somewhere like, because the Netherlands has got this already, I wonder if a city like Paris implementing this quite forcefully will be the catalyst to have it change in other cities around the world. And actually this kind of situation that we saw during the pandemic will become more of a norm maybe in the future.
Well, it could. So. I mean, we have to accept, I've always avoided driving in London anyway, in the centre of London, because it's a pain in the arse. And we're now at the point where the bicycle is genuinely quicker. I've done the experiment. It is quicker. But occasionally, we had to go and buy some bedding the other day, and you can't carry duvets and things on a bike very easily. We also had to buy a piece of furniture. You can't carry that on a bike. But there's a lot of stuff. I mean, the vast majority of local shopping, a huge amount of commuting can be done on bicycles. And the advent of the pedal-assist electric bike that's going to be a really, really important development in the history of personal transport, I think. Because it turns something that's incredibly convenient and slim and space efficient, the bicycle, into something with genuine legs for even an average user. A decent electric assist bike, you could do a 25-mile commute on it, and you actually can do that without killing yourself.
Especially in a city like ours. We're in Bath, and it's essentially a bowl. And
yes,
that's great for coming into work. I can do it in 5 minutes flat. Perfect. Going home.
Yeah,
not so much fun.
Yes.
Is there an e-bike amongst your 21 in your stable at the moment?
There is, which I slightly don't like to admit to, but I've got a Bianchi Aria E-Road, which I keep down in extremely hilly South Wiltshire, because with the best will in the world, I am almost 60, and I'm not that fit, and some of those hills are absolute bastards. So I'm slightly in two minds about it. It's very clever tech. It's surprisingly powerful, given that the battery is hidden away, and you can hardly tell it's an electric bike unless you look at it very carefully. But they're still restricted to 15 miles an hour, unlike the American versions, which do 20. There must be a little fudge for that somewhere, because the kit is.
There is.
I haven't found it yet, but there are times when I'm riding it where I think this is a godsend, but other times when I think I've just ended up with a very heavy bike here. Slightly uphill at 16 miles an hour. You're not getting any assistance. You've just got an extra 7 kilograms of bike to load around you. So
yeah, I think that is one of the barriers to them really taking off is the speed restriction. If we can get that,
I think certainly in like a road bike sense, because 20 miles an hour is very achievable for like a wide range of people. For city ride, I mean, I commute most of the time on a cargo bike, an electric cargo bike, which doesn't ever need to go faster than about 13 miles an hour. So it's absolutely fine, apart from when you're hooning down the hill.
And unless we're filming on it.
Yeah.
Apart from that.
Yeah. But that'd be a great bike around that. I mean, I've used a load of different e-bikes over the years, and kind of the sort of long tail. I've got a Turn GSD, so the long tail cargo bikes are completely brilliant for just kind of general living. Very good in London as long as you've got the space to store them. But, yeah. They're completely brilliant, and I can't recommend them enough. Do you see a lot of people on e-bikes in London? More than you did before?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of e-bikes, and there's a lot of people who have obviously tampered with them, because occasionally you're going on quite pleased with yourself at your 40 mile an hour average, and it's usually a kid, to be honest. I say a kid, like a teenager, goes past on one of those fat tired e-bikes, and they're easily doing 30 miles an hour. I don't know what the hell they've done to them. And they're not pedaling assisting either. They're simply holding a button down and flying along. You see quite a lot of that. I think it might have made more sense. I was slightly besotted with the Aria because of the Celeste paintwork, and it's just a beautiful looking bike. And I am a complete sucker. If you leave me outside a bike shop, I will go in and buy a bike unless somebody restrains me. I'm a weakling. But it would have actually made more sense to have more of a hybrid bike with pedal assist. I think it would be more useful, unless you sort of feel a little bit with I'll hold my hands up to this because I'm not pretending to be a serious cyclist or anything. But if you've got a carbon road bike that's electric assist, it feels like you're sort of trying to cheat. You're trying to pull the wool over people's eyes a bit. If you've got a simple town hybrid bike that's electric assist, you can say, yes, I like to use the bike, but I like a bit of help. But because it's a road bike and it's the sort of thing where you aim for, as you say, big climbs or personal best, then having the electric bit is sort of makes you slightly untrustworthy, I think.
A little bit, although
I felt the same way until I could climb next to a hill climb champion, and then I was all for them after.
And as I always like to say, you can't cheat at having fun, can you? So
no, you can't. Maybe we shouldn't get too worked up about it.
And what's next for you in terms of bikes? Is there anything on your kind of radar that you'd like to get hold of?
I don't think so. I think the thing with bikes, I'll probably make another special soon, because I sort of do one every couple of years or so. I think with slightly unusual or slightly quirky bikes, they tend to find you. You don't really go looking for them. You'll be looking online, or you'll walk past a bike shop one day and you'll think, oh, that's interesting. And then you go in and you start talking about it. And if you're not careful, you end up buying it. So there isn't, I don't have a thing in mind. I think I've got to get a whatever. But I suppose if I've ever got enough space to actually have like a little bike museum rather than having them all just stacked up in the garage, there are a few things I'd quite like for nostalgic reasons. I would like a really mint 1970s, early 80s Dawes Super Galaxy in green with the Suntour derailleurs and all that stuff. Because my mate Cookie had one, and I had one when I was a student at university, and I had to sell it when we finished because I was so broke. I sold it for something like £10. Absolutely criminal. So I would sort of quite like another one of those. I'd quite like, what was I looking at the other day? And I thought, I really fancy that. Oh, it was a Pearson, the titanium Pearson. I can't remember what it's called. It's very expensive.
Yeah.
But it's a gorgeous looking thing. I could look at that for an evening instead of watching television. I'd just prop it up in the sitting room. I'd sit there with a beer or a nice glass of red and just look at that bike. I'd be very... I'm not alone in that though, am I? People do that.
No.
No.
Yeah. Liam especially.
Yeah, every night. It's my entertainment. We don't have a television.
Don't have a television.
Have you ever been tempted by a gravel bike or a mountain bike? Have you ever done any of that?
No, I've got an old doors. It's not really a mountain bike. It's I suppose you'd call it an ATB. I don't particularly like riding on gravel, and I've tried a couple of. In fact, one of them was a Pearson gravel bike setup. Sort of basically road bike with one chain wheel and the widespread cassette. And I thought it was quite nice, but I need to be a bit more scientific about this, but once you've gone down the road bike route, and road bikes are definitely they're the best type of bike. They're the purest in my view. But once you've done that, you might as well do it properly. You've got to have very hard, very narrow tires and very light wheels, because I know, because I've got my Garmin and I save the rides. If I do, so a typical ride across town for me would be, say, going up to see some people I work with up in town, which is about 6 or 7 miles away. So I'll go there and back on, say, my Cube or something like that 3-speeder. And I will notice that, and I ride fairly consistently. My average speed will be something like 11 miles an hour. Then I do it on the Orbea or my Giant, and my average speed can be over 14 miles an hour, which for an old bloke like me is quite good. But that difference is significant, I think. That sort of 20% improvement just from having a bike that is better set up, a bit more tightly sorted out, and it's got thinner tires and it's a bit lighter and it's a bit stiffer. And I hate the thought of wasting energy when I'm going along on a bicycle. I want it to all go into the bike and down onto the road. I don't want any of it to go into sort of heaving weights around or dragging brakes or stiff chains or bendy bits or anything like that. I want it to all my feeble effort has to turn into motion. Otherwise, I'm deeply dissatisfied.
That is fair enough, I think. And one thing we always like to ask, if you were to put anything in your cycling room 101, what would it be? What is it about cycling that you most despise?
Oh, that's a good question. Cycling room 101. There's got to be something that
Was all good? It might all be good.
I'm going to say, actually, now this is not a popular opinion, I don't think, among cyclists, but I'm going to put flashing front lights in room 101.
Yes.
Because I'm absolutely convinced, both from driving the car and riding along on my bike and my motorcycles, if a bicycle's coming towards you with a flashing light, it's harder to see how far away it is. And there may well be a reason for that, to do with persistence of vision or blind spots or something, but I find it very difficult to judge where a flashing light is compared with a solid one. And I always put my lights on. They've all got the flashing setting like all LED lights have now, but I always put it on the solid setting because anything else is a little bit confusing. And also it's a little bit in your face, flashing lights. Am I alone in this? Do most people think flashing lights are brilliant? Flashing back lights are okay. It's the front light that bothers me.
No, I'm with you on fronts.
I think there's a time and a place for it. I mean, I think in the daytime they work quite well, but at night they're...
Yeah, I'm meaning
we have like a big a shared use path near us with a long tunnel in it. Going through there and somebody approaching with a flashing light is it's quite hard work to work out where they are, both like in terms of like their position on the path and like how far away they are. Right? Yeah,
that's what I think. I think it becomes the distance thing becomes harder to judge. Also, you feel like you're at a very sort of cheap rip-off prog rock concert when people are riding around in tunnels with their flash.
Brilliant. Well, I'm aware that we've talked for a while. Have you got time for just a few user questions at the end? Is that all right?
Yes. You haven't shown a picture of the Cube, though, and it will be very, very hurt.
Hang on a sec. I'll get the cube.
There you go. I actually hated that. I've had that for a while. Sorry about that. It's not a child being murdered. That's my cat.
Is that your cat?
Our cat sings in a weird way. She's not in any pain. She's perfectly happy, but she just likes singing. Yes, I've had that for a few years. And when I first got that bike, I really didn't like it because it felt, the geometry is such that the bottom bracket is slightly higher off the ground than it would be on a road bike. And the problem I have with that is by the time you get the saddle right for the correct leg extension, you're then too far off the deck to put your feet on the ground, or I might have odd proportions. So I didn't like it. It felt inefficient and clumsy, but I fiddled around with it. And when I got the setup and the saddle right, I realized that it's actually quite a nice, in fact, it's a very nice all-round town biff-about bike, that. And it's equipped with Shimano 105, and I've got other bikes with 105 on, but there's something about that edition of it, partly because the shift levers are nice and long under your thumbs. It's the best shifting bike I have. It's like that every time, even up onto the big chain wheel. Nice positive heave on the lever, on the left lever, and it's just there, no noise. It works perfectly. It wasn't a particularly expensive bike, that, but it feels a lot more expensive than it was. It feels very sophisticated.
I think one of the reasons for that shift quality that you mentioned is that you get a lot of mechanical advantage with a thumb-operated trigger shifter.
I agree.
And that's what you need to start the process, because those get a bit nerdy here, but those 105 those 105 front derailleurs, they take quite a bit of effort to get going, but once they get going, there's a lot of advantage in the system.
No, I'm glad you've said that, because my Giant, and I've converted it to Di2, but that had 105 cable shifts on. And what you're saying is exactly right, because on the left-hand shifter, it's got a compact chain set, but if you were sort of slightly feeble or limp about the push, you'd get that proper rang as it tried to climb. But you had to sort of set your mind and say, right, here we go, prime your finger, and then make sure your fingers are down the end of the lever. As you say, more advantage is better, and give it a really positive shove, and then it would jump up really nicely. But you're right, the thing about the cube is that thumb lever, which is about that long, you're automatically getting a nice big bit of leverage. And if you give it a proper swift shove, you get a perfect front shift. It's a lovely bike, that. I've become extremely fond of it, having at first put it in a corner and sneered at it every time I walk past.
This would be my Room 101 thing. Is absolutely frozen hands in the winter. This is back when I first started riding, when I didn't have proper winter gloves. Frozen hands in the winter, trying to change the front neck. Oh my! Just almost reaching over with my right hand to drag the shifter across. Oh, it was terrible. But those days are gone. I've got Di2 on my winter bike.
Oh, bless your heart.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Also, gloves have come on a long way since I was a lad.
They have.
There's been of oilskin and sheep fat or something.
Right, it's probably time for just a few of these. Let's get a couple of them up. Here we go. Would you ever do a show with cycling? Maybe bring back the reassembler and repair a rally chopper, put a rally chopper together.
Oh, that is a very poignant question, because when we made the reassembler, one of the things I wanted to do was the bicycle. I said, "Oh, this is perfect, putting a bike together. Everybody's done that at some point." But the BBC had just commissioned another show that was about building bicycles. So they said, you can do anything you like, but not a bicycle. I have proposed before in the past, it was to the BBC, a show which was sort of combining the history of the bicycle with middle-aged male health and fitness, which we must take very seriously, and a little bit of travel. So it was sort of riding around the countries of Europe, doing a cultural exploration from the saddle of a bike, but going through the ages of the bike as you went. But nobody was really interested. But I might try it again, because that was probably six or 7 years ago, and cycling is an even hotter topic now. So it might be worth a repitch. But I'm very glad whoever asked that question. Thank you very much. Because I'm now writing this.
Will Rogers, you got to thank for that.
Will Rogers, you need a commission.
I owe you a £5, Will Rogers, for reminding me of that. As I'm writing it right now on my to-do list. There it is.
Excellent. Fantastic. Let's get another one. How about this? What can be done about a culture wars between drivers and cyclists being stoked in the media?
Well,
Feel about this as like a person very much in both camps.
I think the thing I can't stand, I've railed about this before, I can't stand road sectarianism because it's feeble-minded. So, supposedly bus drivers hate taxi drivers and car drivers hate cyclists, but cyclists hate people on electric scooters, and so it goes on and on and on. It's a great story for the media because they like to get famous radio personality on there ranting about bikes, then a taxi driver possibly ranting about how he or she has to make a living. It's a good story, but it's all bollocks. Frankly, people just need to accept that we've got enough common enemies. To be honest, if you're riding a bike or driving a car or using a motorcycle or a scooter. Things like potholes, bad road markings, badly parked things, roadworks, bits being constantly dug up. All these things annoy all of us, and we have those in common. We don't need to fall out with each other about it. I find it very feeble.
All right, let's go more light-hearted to the next one. What would be the best cycling trip for breweries or wineries?
Ooh, yes.
James knows his drinks.
This is a show that I'd like us all to collaborate on because I'd very much like to go on the trip.
I like the idea of this because on my Garmin, I've fitted the beers earned widget. I don't know if any of you are familiar with.
Yeah.
And I think, to be honest, they've got it the wrong way round. What you should do is enter the number of beers you had yesterday. Then you have to ride them off. But I like the idea that you would go. I mean, I'd have to think very hard about the route. You could go, stop singing. She's deaf, unfortunately. She's very old. I don't think she knows that she's making a noise. It's true, but I can assure you, she's not in any pain or distress. It's a hobby. Yeah, but you could work out a very complicated route that went over the whole country. But I like the idea that you would earn your glass of wine or your pint or your craft gin that you had at the end of the day because you would have put the miles in, and you could have your little Garmin running, and you could set it for either beers or glasses of wine. I mean, you can configure it slightly, and I think that would be. I mean, I sort of have done it when I was younger, and I did things like Land's End to John O'Groats. You would celebrate the end of the day with a beer, and you'd really enjoy it, knowing that you'd put the work in. Same as if you've been doing strenuous gardening or working in a foundry all day. An earned beer tastes much better than a sort of ponced beer, if you like.
I'm gonna do a little request to anyone watching. Give us your suggestions because I'm now thinking that I'm absolutely making this trip happen.
Oh, what, your wineries tour?
Yes, and breweries in particular.
Nice.
So, another, sort of going back to TV ideas that have been rejected, another one that I proposed a few years ago with Oz Clark, who I used to make the drinks program with, was Oz and James's Tour de France. And it was going to be about French cooking and wine and a bit of beer. Not the Tour de France route, but our own devised route that would take in some significant wine regions. And the idea was that we'd make a program that was about, I mean, Oz is even older than me. We'd make a program about how men of a certain age have to look after their health and do some exercise, but at the same time, we defend our God-given right to get totally plastered. And then you earn the privilege, and then we'll have a nice bottle of Bordeaux. But I thought it would be, well, obviously I would say this because I'd be doing it, but I thought it was a fantastic idea for a show, but it was rejected.
It sounds like a great idea, even if there isn't a show involved.
I'm
really.
pretty sure Mickey Flanagan has done something similar, hasn't he?
Filming things does tend to spoil them, actually. Maybe it's better to just go on holiday.
Yeah. Right, a couple more quick ones. What's your favourite pre-2000s road bike?
Oh, God. No, I'm not particularly an expert, but I would say I used to love in the 90s, and it's because there was far less variety in bikes in Britain back then. But I really liked the Dawes Gyro because my local bike shop used to have those. There were several levels of gyro. There was a sort of basic one, and then there was quite a posh one, which used to be available in yellow and white. And I used to really covet that bike. It probably wasn't particularly sophisticated. It probably had sort of quite nice components, and it would have had, I suppose, an aluminium frame, wouldn't it? But I really liked the Dawes Gyro. Was there anything else? God, 90s bikes.
What are we talking about then? TCR, the original TCR came out in the 90s, didn't it?
No, you're right. The original TCR is a late 90s bike, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Started the sloping top tube revolution, didn't it, really?
that was Mike Burrows, wasn't it? That is a very significant bike in the history of the bike. So yes, I'll have an early TCR.
All right, nice one. Okay, we'll do one last one. What would it take to convince Jeremy Clarkson to become a regular cyclist, do you think?
I mean, he has done it a bit for appearances, but let's be honest, he doesn't ride a bike. To be honest, part of the problem is he can't. He can't. I mean, he's got like a sort of basic upright hybrid bike, but it's got derailleur gears, and he can't do it. I've been on a bike ride with him, and I've had to explain to him derailleurs work when the pedals are turning and the chain is moving. It's not the same as a hub, which you might have had as a kid, which will shift when you're stationary. That's one of the advantages of them. But the derailleur, I've explained to him how it works. I said, this is how you would adjust it, and this is when you should move it and how. But he simply can't do it. You know, he was set off in obviously too high a gear, and then doing a speed of 1.5 miles an hour and a cadence of, I would guess, about 20 per minute. He would have downshift by 4 gears, and I hate that noise. It sounds like somebody's dropped a toolbox of people misusing derailleurs and mangling and crossing their chains and stuff. I just hate it. It's mechanically unsympathetic. It's a form of abuse. If you did that to a puppy or a kitten, you'd be put in prison, and you should be put in prison for doing it to a bicycle. So I think what would convince Jeremy to become a regular cyclist is if someone else could do it for him. Yeah, do you know what? It's only 5 o'clock, and I normally have a 7 o'clock rule, but having discussed these things at length with you two fine men, I'm going to go now around the corner to the pub. As you know, I'm going to go out on the bike. I'll go and do 5 vigorous miles, and then I'll have a pint.
Well, it's been lovely to speak to you, James. Thanks ever so much for your time. And any time you want to go out for a bike ride when you're in South Wiltshire, just let us know, and we'll turn up at your pub.
We'll pick the earliest route.
Well, we have to make the pub the destination. That's how it works. You can't start at the pub. You have to finish at the pub. That's the rule.
Start and finish at the pub, maybe.
Or we can start and finish at the pub, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thanks ever so much for your time. And it's really good to speak to you.
Yeah, and you. Thank you.
All right.
Well, if you've made it this far, well done. Yeah, have another beer on us. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching James May as much as we enjoyed speaking to him. And in this Giro d'Italia season, if you're interested in all things Italy, you can check out Liam puffing up some Italian coals on a lovely Basso Diamante SV. That video's popping up now.
That was a lovely day on the bike.
Well, lucky old you.
It was raining in the mountains. That was the only downside.
Cheers for watching. We'll see you soon.